Thank you. Don't complain if your husband comes home late for dinner, or even if he stays out all night. Count that as minor to what he might have gone through that day. Don't question him about his money. You know he has your best intentions in mind. And don't ask questions about his actions, his integrity, his judgment. You have no right to question him. A good wife always knows her place. What do you guess, 1800s, Victorian England? Not. Marriage advice in the 40s and 50s. This is the culture in which our moms and our grandmoms were raised in. And if you need a more recent example, look no farther than Glenn Close as she accepted the Golden Globes Award. And she relayed that her mother, in her marriage to her father, had subjugated herself to him her entire adult life. And in her 80s, her mother said to her, "I feel like I have not accomplished anything." With socialization like this, is it any wonder that too many mature women hold fear and doubt about their ability to manage their money? Ultimately, however, these same women sometimes take this inward. And they feel guilt and shame around this, such that they fear finances, sometimes are paralyzed around money decisions. I invite all women, and especially mature women, to realize it's not your fault you weren't taught about money. And it's not your fault that you may fear making a financial mistake. And it's not your fault that you played the expected role of dutiful wife, yet now face the daunting task of investing with very few tools and even less confidence. And I'm inviting the men in these women's lives to appreciate and empathize with these mixed money messages, and encourage your partner to champion with you, because it's been challenging for her to enter into full financial partnership. Now, some of you have found some comfort in allowing your partner to manage the money, and that would be okay if all marriages lasted and the average age of widowhood wasn't 55. But they don't. And it is. I had some fears as a young girl. Would you mind if I shared some of that story around those fears and how I learned from them? Thank you. I was raised Christian fundamentalist, and those Bible verses were reverberating in my mind. Deacons, fear not that filthy lucre. 1 Timothy 3:6 and Matthew 19:24. It's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter heaven. Now, my mom was a seamstress. We had a lot of needles around. And we lived on a 100-acre beef cattle farm, and we didn't have camels, but I had an imagination. Camel, needle. And yet, that was alongside the never so veiled expectation that churchgoers were asked to tithe 10% of their earnings, and on top of that, offerings. So, what? Now money's good? I deduced that maybe money's a necessary evil. And some of those religious overlays were actually so confusing to me and downright frightening for this young girl who was drawn towards the energy of money, yet still very much wanted to enter heaven when she died. But remember, camel, needle. What were those odds? I remember my grandfather's hands shaking as he handed me a certificate of stock. And he said, "Deb, don't sell this until you have to." I knew that was not just a piece of paper. There was some real significance to that. And then my aunt took me to tour the New York Stock Exchange as an 8-year-old, and I was slack-jawed at the shouting and the fist pumping and all of the noise around money. I was pretty sure when I grew up I didn't want to shout and run about in those shin-high papers as a moneymaker. Yet I was drawn to that energy. And I was pretty sure that at that point, money was more necessary than evil. And then I was able to realize that money is a tool, merely a tool, and a tool that buys choices. See, so this helped me discern and unwind some of that earlier dissonance about the power over money abuses that Jesus warned us of. And then the joy and liberation that Jesus invited us to partake in with our money, to help ourselves and also give to others. Now, I know then that when intellect is high, emotions are low, and vice versa. So all the logic in the world is not going to dislodge your fear if you're holding it. And for that, I turn to my dear late friend, Dr. Susan Jeffers, author of the New York Times bestseller, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Dr. Jeffers wrote, if everybody is out there fearful upon encountering something wholly new in life, and yet so many are out there doing it despite the fear, then we must conclude fear is not the problem, but rather how we hold the fear. And Dr. Jeffers developed a pain-power continuum in which she identified on the pain side helplessness, depression, and paralysis, and then opposite those, choice, excitement, and action. I love Dr. Jeffers' continuum in that it connotes this fluidity, right? There's hope for all of us. We can move from our pain to our power. Now, I'm not saying that we're not going to have some occasional anxiousness and uncertainty around our money. That's normal. I just don't want us taking up residency over here. So whenever those negative emotions come up to our conscious mind, I want us to recognize it and begin the shift, shall we? Begin the shift over to our power, to the inner power that Dr. Jeffers urges us to aspire towards, power to recreate our perceptions of our life and reality, power to design lives that are wholesome and giving, and design basically our interpretation of the world. It's that inner power to act, feel the fear, and do it anyway. Now, I have basically, now that we've decided this is how we hold our fear, distilled 3 topics that I'd like to cover. Inflation is number 1. Now, all the market media is just going to jabber on and on every day about price volatility, at the exclusion of talking about inflation. And inflation is far more important than individual stock gyrations and price differences. Why, you say? I remember nickel ice cream cones. I remember 29-cent gas. Any of that resonate? I paid twice as much for my car than my parents paid for their house. Looking forward, a healthy 65-year-old couple is likely to spend, on average, $280,000 for Medicare premiums and deductibles, not extra tests and being unhealthy. Is your money poised to cover that kind of excess? Which brings us to the stock market. And unlike our male counterparts, too many of us women have not invested in the stock market. I think maybe because some women were scared, or someone just didn't explain the math to them. So what I'd like to do is, I'm certainly not going to opine about what the market returns are going to be in the future, but what I'd like to do is take a look at the history of returns in the various asset classes. So this chart takes us back from 1926 clear through 2018. And the bottom line depicts inflation measured by the CPI, Consumer Price Index. Simpler said, $14 today would buy a lunch that $1 would have cost in 1926. Had we been around in 26 and put $1 in Treasury bills, it would amount to $21 at the end of 2018. Had we been around and put $1 in long-term government bonds, it's $142. And now you're going to see a pretty big gulf, right? Had we put $1 in large cap United States stocks, the Standard & Poor 500, we'd have $7,000. And had we been around and put $1 in small stocks, we'd have a whopping $20,000. Now, this is not a chart to suggest we should have been invested exclusively in small stocks, but rather we should have investments in each of these types of investments, somewhat like fingers on our financial hand, so that we can weather pretty much any economic situation. Now, on October 19th, 1987, the U.S. large stock market dropped 28% in 4 hours. It was a huge deal to some people. The market's media pundits were absolutely manic about covering this. And yet, look at the circle on the chart, you'll see not that big of a blip on the radar screen of life. So this causes us to know that we have to control what we can control. We're tasked with that as adults. And what we can control are our actions, our behavior. That leads me to compounding, which is a fantastic tool that makes money as we sleep, if we keep our hands off of it. You see, if someone sold here when the market dropped and didn't get back in, they missed all of that upside. The market was whole again in just over a year and a half. So I make this analogy to us mixing up a cake and popping it in the oven, according to the recipe, of course. That's the plan, the recipe. It says a chocolate cake should bake for 350-degree oven for 1 hour. If we grew impatient and opened the oven door after 10 minutes and jerked that cake out, it won't be the cake you wanted. You'll be disappointed. That cake will fall. Likewise, if we take monies out of our long-term investments, particularly in the stock market, which clearly would be for 7-plus-year goals, it's quite likely we're not going to be pleased with that result, especially if we have basically reacted to market pundits, veins popping, yelling, "The stock market is crashing, the stock market is crashing." The inference is, don't just sit there, do something, stupid. Now, longevity has increased a lot due to science. And now a healthy 65-year-old couple has a 50% chance of one of them living to age 92, and a 25% chance of one of them living past age 97. Are your investments going to last that long? I think we have a choice now to live a tethered or untethered life to the math and the science and the art around successful investing. You can either do it yourself. The internet's open 24/7. But don't forget to guarantee you have a 95% success rate on that Monte Carlo, and manage your magi so that you won't incur not 1 but 2 years of excess premiums on your Medicare Part C and D. And make sure you avoid the 3 most costly financial mistakes in IRA rollovers, and manage that provisional income to reduce your taxes and reduce your required minimum distribution legally, and invest across asset classes, size, countries, and momentum, and rebalance each quarter. And make sure you're eligible and you take all of the Social Security you're eligible for. And don't forget to cash in on that 8% guaranteed annual rate that they're giving. And ultimately manage the sequence of return risk, which could save you groups of zeros. You know, just like you might think of doing your own heart surgery. Or capping that chipped front tooth yourself. Or, of course, you can seek the help of a professional. And there are many financial professionals, and you want to do the research to select the one that's going to be best for you. So come on. Step into your greatness. Step into your financial greatness, women. And men, step into the greatness of co-creating with your partners a truly empowered retirement. Feel the financial fear and do it anyway. Thank you.